Hi, good day, and welcome to part two. And welcome to part two of reproduction, right? So 2 out of 6. So let's go to our first slide, right? Now, our first slide is based on sexual intercourse. Now, if you look to the right, here's a very, detailed explanation of, sexual intercourse. But let's see if I can get the main points in using the diagram over here. And of course, you can give this a read afterwards. All right. So what is sexual intercourse? Well, sexual intercourse is when the penis, which is from the male reproductive system, enters, well, the female reproductive system via the vagina. Now, I'm going to use this as an excuse, right, to see how much you remember from part one also. It's always good to, revise a little bit. All right. So during sexual intercourse, the male reproductive system will produce sperm. So sperm will exit the penis, and of course, it will be deposited within the vagina itself. Quick question. Which part of the male reproductive system produces sperm? Is it the penis? Does the penis produce sperm? And the answer to that question is no. All right. So if the penis does not produce sperm, which part of the male reproductive system produces sperm? If you remember this testes or testicles, you are correct. Are the testes also known? Well, the testes and the testicles are the same thing. Where are they located? Are they located inside the body or outside the body? If you remember that it's located outside the body, you have it correct. All right, so quick revision there. So another question is, if the testes produce the sperm, how do they reach into the penis and exit at the top of the penis? See if you can remember, or you could go back into the notes you made in part one and see if you can get the answer. Well, take a few seconds, and if you had remembered that inside the penis itself, there's a duct, a pathway that connects the penis to the general area of where the sperm is produced. That duct that allows the sperm to flow through is the urethra, right? And the reason I'm asking these questions is because these questions are the same questions you're going to get in your exam, right? They're very, very popular questions. All right, so moving on. So once the sperm makes it out of the penis and it's deposited into the vagina, what will happen? The sperm will begin to move its way upwards or swim its way upwards. And then it will enter this area. This is a uterus. And then from here, it will either enter one of these, fallopian tubes. So it can either go to this one or it can go this one. And in case you can't remember, these tubes here are called let me spell it out here. Fallopian tubes. And what happens there? The fallopian tubes connect back to the ovaries. So this here is your ovary, and the ovary produces the egg. So here's a little egg here. So what needs to happen is that the sperm needs to swim up and come in contact with one of the eggs. So the sperm and eggs may fuse together. Now, it's very important to note this. You have 2 ovaries. Do the 2 ovaries produce eggs at the same time? And when the answer to that question is no, they alternate. 1 month, this ovary will produce an egg, and then the other month, this ovary will produce what? An egg, right? And the eggs are produced once a month, right? So, how do you say, the purpose of sexual intercourse is to ensure that a sperm comes into contact with an egg. Now, common sense will tell you, since only one egg is released per month, right? And there's a very, very strong possibility that a sperm may not come in contact with an egg. Because once an egg is released, it doesn't last an entire month in the fallopian tubes, right? There's only like a few hours. I think it's 36 hours, if I'm not mistaken, roughly 36 hours. So there are a lot of times during sexual intercourse where the female is not producing an egg, or there's no egg in the fallopian tubes. So when the sperm is released, there's no chance of it coming in contact with an egg. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. Right, so we have a more detailed, a better diagram here of the female reproductive system here. All right, so let's talk a little bit of fertilization. Now, at the end of the day, fertilization is a very simple concept on the surface. This is when a sperm fuses together with an egg, right? The male gametes fuse with the female gametes, right? And here we have, well, I think I just, what I say, I described this process here just now. The sperm is usually deposited in this area by the penis. It goes up into the uterus. Of course, the ovaries will release an egg, and once again, the sperm needs to come together with the egg or fuse with the egg. Now, here's the thing. Let's see how much you can remember. Sperm. How much chromosomes do you think sperm will have? Will sperm have 23 chromosomes or 46 chromosomes? And this was discussed in the first part of this lesson, 1 out of 6. Sperm has 23 chromosomes, right? So 23 different types of chromosomes. The egg also has 23 chromosomes. So when the two fuse together, one sperm and one egg, the total amount of chromosomes, if you add them up, will be 46 chromosomes, right? So you have a full chromosome set there. 46 is what I have, 46 is what you have. You get half from your father, you get half from your mother. Great. Now, here's the thing. Sperm, remember, it has 23 chromosomes. One of those 23 chromosomes has, well, it's called an X chromosome or a Y chromosome. So sperm has a choice, right? One of the chromosomes could either be a special chromosome called the X chromosome or the Y chromosome. When a male deposits or produces sperm, it's not one sperm that's produced, it's millions upon millions that are produced, right? And these millions of sperm all swim and compete to come in contact with the one egg, but only one sperm can fuse with one egg. So that means there's only one lucky sperm. The rest of them do not get to fuse with the egg. Now, the sperm that comes in contact with the egg can either have an X chromosome or a Y chromosome. Quick question. Can one single sperm contain a X and Y chromosome at the same time? And the answer is no. One sperm either has X or it has a Y. It cannot have both at the same time. Now, eggs are different. Remember, the eggs belong to the female. all eggs have an X chromosome. There's no such thing as an egg made by a female that has a Y chromosomes. So if your sperm has an X chromosome and the egg that got fertilized by that sperm also has an X chromosomes, well, you get two X's. In a case like that, the child that's going to be eventually formed from this sexual intercourse process is going to be a girl. It's going to be female. However, if the sperm that came in contact with the egg has a Y chromosome, and remember, the egg must have an X chromosome, then you have something called an XY. So when an X and a Y meet, the child that's going to be created from that process is going to be male. So XX is female and XY is male. All right, so now you have a little insight on how a girl child is a girl baby is created or a boy baby is created. It all depends on the types of chromosomes that come together. Okay, right. So let's move on to the next slide. All right, and I hope you all remember that you need to learn of all the different parts of the male and female reproductive system and learn its functions. Okay, let's move on to slide number 3. Fertilization and implantation. All right, so we just described what fertilization is. Fertilization is when the sperm fuses with the egg. And we just learned you could either, when the fusion happens, you could either get a XX combination or a XY combination, which determines whether it's a boy or a girl. I think I mentioned this or in the previous lesson. When the sperm fuses with the egg, you get something called a zygote, right? That's the technical name for it, when the sperm merges or fuses with the egg. Now, that usually happens around here. Remember, while the sperm is swimming in the fallopian tubes, an egg will be released and move in the opposite way. So there's a good chance they will meet what? Halfway. And a lot of the times, I mean, they can meet before, a little bit to the end, but let's just, I can only assume that most of the times they meet midway, right? So the zygote forms midway. Now, once the zygote is formed, it begins to multiply, right? So you have one zygote first, one cell, and then they begin to what? Multiply, right? So you get more and more and more. And of course, while it's multiplying, it's the whole structure is moving out of the fallopian tubes. Great. Once it makes it out, right? Remember, this zygote that's started to multiply will eventually, how you say, grow into a child. It will grow into a baby. But for that to happen, the zygote that's multiplying gets implanted. It comes like it sticks on to the walls of the uterus. Now, just in case you can't remember, this area of the female reproductive system, this area is called the uterus. This structure gets stuck on to the walls of the uterus, but we don't call it getting stuck on the uterus. The official scientific name or biological name for that is implantation. So it gets implanted on the walls of the uterus. And when that gets planted here, the uterus, the walls of the uterus are going to become thicker, right? It's going to become thicker and thicker. And the reason for that is the uterus is getting thicker. And so it can provide nutrients to this growing structure here. And of course, when it's providing nutrients to this implanted structure here, that structure is going to grow more and more and more and eventually grow into a baby. Right? So that's fertilization and a detailed explanation of what implantation is. Also, in the exam, they love to ask you for the definition of what a zygote is. I've I've written it out for you here to memorize for the exam, right? So no excuses, guys. You're supposed to get full marks in your exam in this topic, right? But anyway, let's move on. All right. So I think I already described this one here, but this one is a little probably some points that I missed out, right? So the implantation, right? Well, remember we said when the zygote is over here and it begins to multiply, right? Grow, right? It's going to what? Get implanted on the uterus. Now, some general things that I may have forgotten to mention. After fertilization, that is when the sperm and the egg meet, the zygote remains in the fallopian tubes for approximately 3 to 4 days. So it's going to stay, the zygote is going to stay here for 3 to 4 days and do what? Multiply. But I mentioned that already, right? So it begins to multiply and, more and more cells are formed. And as it continues its journey towards the uterus, obviously more cell divisions are going to occur. In other words, it's going to continue growing, and then it gets implanted on the walls of the uterus. Now, I have one question that I want to ask you here. I mentioned that the zygote, it's how you say, growing, right? So it's the cells are dividing, it's forming copies of itself, right? Do you think the structure here, is it mitosis or meiosis? If you had to take an educated guess, which one do you think it is? If you guessed mitosis, you are correct. So in case they ask you that in the exam, what type of cell division is going on in this area here in the fallopian tubes? With the zygote? It's mitosis. Mitosis is the one that divides into two exact equal cells. And both cells, after they divide, have 46 chromosomes. Remember, the zygote has 46 chromosomes, 23 from the sperm and 23 from the egg, right? Now, don't get me wrong. Sperm, right, which has 23 chromosomes, and the egg, which has 23 chromosomes, the process that created sperm was meiosis. And the process that created an individual egg is also meiosis. But a zygote, right, what the word is, a zygote is not an individual sperm or an individual egg. It's the merger of both of them. And they together, the zygote is a different structure now. He's a combination of both of them. He has 46 chromosomes. And when it's time for him to multiply, he will split or create clones of itself with 46 chromosomes in it. That's why it's mitosis. Right? Just in case it comes in the exam. Right? You never know. Right, next slide. Now, whenever fertilization happens, right? Now, your body always knows what's going on in it. It always sends messages. There are ways of sending messages around the body. So when a sperm fuses with an egg and you get a zygote, your body will know. It will know. And it knows that now it has to prepare for a baby because a baby is on its way, right? Because a zygote has been formed. So the uterus here now, it needs to start getting thicker. The walls need to start to grow and get thick so that the zygote could get implanted properly within the uterus. So what your body does, right? Your ovaries do a lot of things. A lot of people think the ovary only makes the eggs, but the ovaries can do a lot of other things. Your ovaries will begin to produce a special hormone, progesterone. What the progesterone will do, remember, hormones are chemicals in your body, and these hormones make your body do certain things. So progesterone will make the uterus walls grow so it can prepare for pregnancy. It can prepare to have that zygote grow into a baby. All right? Make sure you take down everything I have on each slide. Let's move on, right? And remember how to spell these words, right? It could give you some trouble in the exam if you don't practice spelling them in your spare time. Right. And don't worry, you're going to be hearing about progesterone, I believe in lesson 3 and lesson 4 in more detail. So you're going to get familiar with it. Right. Now, here's the thing. Eggs are not always fertilized. Sperms do not always fuse with eggs. Sometimes an egg is produced, right? So an egg is produced and it's making its way, and no sperm shows up to fertilize it. So no zygote is formed. Well, what happens in a case like this? The egg, the sad egg, just makes its way out of the fallopian tubes. Obviously, no progesterone is produced because the body knows, hey, this egg has not been fertilized. We don't have a baby on its way. So the egg just goes into the uterus and what the body does, right? Now, I mean, the uterus is always growing a little bit, right? It's always growing a little bit. But the progesterone just makes it grow much, much, much more. So when the egg comes here, what will happen? The body will realize, wait, no, we don't have a baby on its way. So the uterus walls, which are not so thick because no progesterone was, created in the ovaries, whatever wall lining you had here in the uterus with the egg gets kind of washed out of the body. Well, when you call that, well, females usually call it their periods, but the real name is it's the menstrual periods. And what happens? Everything gets the best word right now, it's late in the night. I'm trying to figure out the best word to use. It gets kind of flushed out or washed out of your body. And of course, when that happens, the whole process restarts again. Your body will begin, well, the female body will do what now? Since it just flushed out or washed out all of the linings, the wall linings from the uterus and the unfertilized egg, the body says, all right, let's try again. So the ovaries will begin to do what? Create a new egg, which will take some time. It doesn't happen immediately. It takes time for the ovary to grow a new egg, release it back out. And of course, it takes some time for the walls in the uterus to grow back. Okay? So oh, and by the way, the menstrual cycle, right, which is what I just described in, I guess, in a very summarized form. I have to describe that in total detail. So I think that's going to be in lesson 3 out of 6. But I'm just, I'm just introducing you to it now, right? All right, so we reached the end of 2 out of 6, and very soon I will be making 3 out of 6, guys. Take care, and I hope you all learned a lot in this particular tutorial. Have a good one, guys.